Making Space generously supported wellbeing teams in our first few years in Wigan. And one of the things they benefited from, they tell me, is being able to see what a very different kind of working looks like, what self-management looks like in practice. And then we started to explore together how some of these practices may be useful in making space. But rather than saying, let's set up prototype teams, what we did is decide to take a different approach and use the ready cards. These are the ready cards, and as you'll see, there are a range of cards, and each card has on it one of the challenges of working in modern day organisations. And what we did was we invited a range of different teams, all the different teams that are currently in head office. So that would include payroll, HR, finance, IT, business development, marketing and communications. And we asked them to come together in their teams, quality as well, and to look at what was getting in the way of them doing their best work. So the first dots were on what gets in the way of us doing our best work in making space. And you'll see that there's some clusters here. And then we asked people to think about what's getting in the way of them in their team doing their best work. And here were some of the ones that got the most votes. Too much email, having meetings to prepare for meetings, meetings that don't lead to decisions or actions, people not doing what they say they were going to do, a sense of everybody needed to be involved in all things. So we asked people to sit in their table groups, and here's finance, and to look at all the cards with dots and decide which was the key one that was really getting in the way for them. And then for each tension, I then introduced 3 or 4 different practices. And these are practices that are used by self-managed teams or that we've used in wellbeing teams that help move towards a greater sense of autonomy. We're not looking for these teams to become self-managed, but we want to increase the amount of autonomy that they're operating under. And we did this in the context of 8-week sprints. So we invited them together for half a day. We identified or asked them to identify what was getting in the way of them doing their best work. I would share several practices that could help. They chose the practice that most worked for them. They collected data to reflect on the situation and to see where we were now. They got excellent coaching from the HR team to support them to do this. And then we brought them back for a day in 8 weeks' time to share and celebrate. And here are some of the results. So one of the teams, human resources, their tension was not being able to say no, but they reframed that to ask themselves, were they saying yes to the right things? The practices they looked at is thinking about their team purpose and getting clarity about what their team was there for and therefore what people could ask them to do, and took a coaching approach with other colleagues from other departments. They re-looked at team agreements and got really clear about those, and they started a team profile to share with other people. From their data, it looks like they saved over 12 hours a week and had much greater clarity of their roles. And here was one of the ways that they captured information. So they were looking at what calls they were getting from other departments, whether this was information that they should already know that was in the public domain or provided previously, or whether it was a software inquiry, and looked at different ways that they could respond differently to people asking them for those kinds of responses. Another team was payroll, and the tension that they explored was our processes get in the way. And they looked at working, not working review of all their processes and moved towards a much streamlined system and got rid of 10 forms. Now, it wasn't just that they decided to get rid of 10 forms, they did that in partnership with colleagues. But they say that this gave them the opportunity to do things that they'd really always wanted to do, but didn't actually know if they had permission to do or figured out the time to do it. And this process enabled that to happen. And then we have the marketing and communications team. Their tension was that they were working on the wrong things. So one of the practices they introduced was what they call Goldfest, which is a weekly sharing of goals for the week ahead to reduce duplication. They reviewed how they were supporting operations and moved from where they sensed they were duplicating effort to using tensions And amazingly, they figured out that they have saved 25% of their time each week by working differently and reducing duplication. At the end of the sprint, at 8 weeks, we invited the teams to come and put up a poster that summarised what their tension was, that what they were doing differently about that and what they'd found. And we invited all the teams to come and look round at the posters and see what their colleagues had done. And then we invited people to come and do a short 5 or 10 minute presentation to the group, often using PowerPoint, and tell their story that way. So Phil Orton, the Director of HR, and Rachel Peacock, the CEO, described this as a triathlon of sprints. So we're in the middle of our second sprint now. It's not only happening in HR, in HQ with the different teams, we're also doing this with a couple of teams in operations. And then after 3 lots of sprints, people think they'll be in a much closer position to know which practices really work well to address the challenges that people are experiencing, and then consider whether to roll them out across services. And these are the practices that have been used in Sprint 1 and now in Sprint 2. So 1-page profiles for individuals, team profiles that describe who we are and how you can support us, team agreements that are really, really clear about what's okay and what's not okay in this team, getting absolutely crystal clear about role descriptions and what you can therefore expect from each other, using confirmation practices to review team agreements, things like the impact and effort matrix to plan your work differently, stand-up meetings to share information at the beginning of the week and avoid duplication, and 2 of the teams use visual information, for example, a whiteboard, and set up Kanbans where you're looking at what we've got to do, what are we doing at the moment, and what's done. In the Sprint 2, they're building on some of these, but also looking at a very different kind of meeting called tactical meetings, where you raise and address tensions. And we're also providing training on compassionate communication to support people to feel more comfortable and confident in having difficult conversations. So that's an example about how making space or moving forward